Hello, we'll be going through the weapon skills in this tier list. I will just be looking at the mundane weapons because if I include all of the special weapon skills from the magic items, that adds another 30 or so different skills to go through, and that's just a bit too long for my tastes. As usual, this is just my casual opinion. You let me know what you think of these different weapon skills. I will be going through them in alphabetical order, starting with Backbreaker. Backbreaker is a weapon action for Warhammers and Mauls. So it will do 1d4, not the normal weapon damage, but 1d4 plus 6 bludgeoning damage. The enemy has to make a strength saving throw against your weapon action DC. I'll show you how that's calculated soon. Now, since this is a strength saving throw, I am going to target an enemy with a low strength. Couple of things to note. If you are wielding a weapon two-handed and have great weapon master, then it will be added to the damage roll. Secondly, the weapon action DC. This is equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus. I'm at level 12, so that's plus 4. Plus the highest bonus out of either strength or dexterity. So I've got the Gauntlets of Hill Giant strength, so it's a plus 6. So it's 8 plus 4 plus 6, which is 18. So that's why the DC here is 18. So it knocks the enemy prone. Prone is a great condition to have. So I will be ranking these based on the conditions themselves, not which weapons they are available to. Prone is great because it gives all attacks from within melee range advantage. They have disadvantage on strength and dexterity saving throws. This is where your spellcasters can come in now with even greater effect. And it uses half the movement speed to stand up. Also, if an enemy is concentrating on something, it breaks their concentration. Now it does say 2 turns remaining, but as soon as it is Gauntlet Edwina's turn, she will stand up and prone will go away. So although in theory it's 2 turns, practically it's just until the beginning of their next turn. Weapon actions all recharge on a short rest. I'm going to stick Backbreaker in A tier, and this is because it targets strength, which with the prone condition is really going to be strong against spellcasters because it will break their concentration. I do find Backbreaker very useful. And with this weapon action, and I would say for most of the weapon actions, you probably want to use them on the first attack in the round if you can. Because now, if I wanted to, all the rest of my characters could come in, and from within melee range, they'll have advantage on their attack. Next up is Brace Ranged, and this can be found on heavy crossbows and longbows. Spend 20 feet of your movement speed for the rest of your turn, roll ranged damage twice, and use the highest result. So this is advantage on your damage rolls. So we use it. I've now used up 20 feet of my movement. So when I attack with my ranged weapon, which within, I think it's 10 feet of a held person, is a critical hit. We can see it used the 7 and the 6 there. I did re-roll a 5 and a 2, so it's worse off. And if I roll again. If I attack again, I then get the 4 and the 7 there. This is pretty much the same for the Brace Melee, except Brace Melee is available to glaives and pikes. I'm not going to show you, it's just the same thing, except with melee damage. I'm putting these down in C tier, although it sounds great. And this is partially dependent on the difficulty you play. This is more if you're playing in honor mode. In Tactician and below, I'd probably bump them up to B tier because it's possible to get more attacks per turn. Because in honor mode, if you use a haste potion or you have an elixir of bloodlust, you only get 1 extra weapon attack. Whereas in the difficulty modes below, you get an extra round's worth of attacks. So you can get all the extra damage out. So I've gone to any dice. And this shows us the output if we roll 1d10 or the highest out of 2d10 rolled. Importantly, I'm going to look at the first number in the brackets here without any sort of advantage on a 1d10. Now I'm using 1d10 because that is the damage die of glaives and pikes and heavy crossbows. For longbows, actually it's 1d8, which makes this even worse. So on average, we're going to get a damage of 5.5. With advantage, we get a damage of 7.15. So an increase of 1.6, roughly 1.65 damage. I'm only going to attack maybe 4 times, 3 times in a round. So really, that's an extra maybe 6 damage at best, 6 and a bit, which really doesn't add up to that much. If you're in Tactician and you're a fighter and you've used Action Surge and Haste and an Elixir of Bloodlust, then actually, yes, this gets quite useful. You're outputting quite a bit of extra damage in the end. But even so, it's just, you know, an extra 6 damage in a round just isn't that great, in my opinion. So I'm going to leave the 2 brace down here. Also, it costs us 20 feet of movement speed, which for the ranged maybe isn't so bad because hopefully you might be far enough away anyway. But for the melee, that can be quite debilitating. Okay, next up is Cleave, and Cleave is available to battle axes, great axes, halberds, and great swords. Swing your weapon. It says in a large arc. I'd contest that. I wouldn't say it's a large arc at all. And attack up to 3 enemies at once. You can just about see the arc here. Maybe it's gotten slightly larger than it used to be, but still, I'd prefer it to be wider. And I can only hit 1 enemy. I'll see if... Yeah, there we are. It's a critical hit, right? So 2d12 instead of 1d12. Plus 2 because the weapons are plus 2, plus 6 for my strength. And that gets divided by 2. But I get Great Weapon Master on top of that. And because I'm a half-orc and scored a critical hit, I can get Savage Attacks on top of that. And I can even smite one of the enemies as well. For full damage. Now what I've just done here is used it in maybe almost the best situation possible where I know I'm going to hit. And I've got Great Weapon Master on guaranteed critical hits. But overall, I'm not actually that impressed with Cleave. I'm struggling between B and C. If you've got Great Weapon Master and you've got a high chance to hit, then maybe B, right? Because then you're going to do a decent amount of damage. If you don't have Great Weapon Master and you have low chances to hit, it's going to be C. It's not going to be that good because you're not going to actually do that much damage. I think I'm going to bump it up to B, give it kind of the benefit of the doubt, but you're not always going to have enemies close enough together to use, which is sometimes really annoying. Next up is Concussive Smash, and the weapons that have this are Morning Stars, clubs, light hammers, maces, warhammers, great clubs, mauls, and flails. So what does this do? It does your normal weapon damage, possibly daze the target, and dazed. Oh, dazed is so good. So they can't take reactions. Cool, that means there's no opportunity attacks coming your way, no counterspelling. They lose a dexterity bonus to their armor class. That depends on the enemy. Sometimes that's very good, sometimes it almost makes no difference. And they get disadvantage on wisdom saving throws, which I think is really, really strong. The enemies have to make a constitution saving throw to save against this. Now, interestingly, Concussive Smash has what at least the BG3 wiki calls hybrid DC. We can see here the difficulty class is 23, which is equal to her actual spell cast, her actual spell save DC. Where's it gone? Cleric. Here we are. 21. And very interestingly, I don't know if this is something that needs to be updated on BG3 wiki. Shadowheart has the Amulet of Greater Health, so her constitution is 23. And actually, her spell save DC is based off her constitution, even though she is a cleric. The last class she took as a multi-class is ranger, so it should be wisdom, really. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this anyway, and then I'm going to take off hold person. Alright, yeah, they were dazed. There's no way that wasn't going to work. Now, they're dazed. They're probably wearing heavy armor, so the dexterity bonus makes no difference here, actually. But even so,
got to focus.
There's no opportunity attack incoming.
Battle favors the fearless.
And they've got disadvantage on wisdom saving throws. So now I've got a 91% chance to inflict Crown of Madness, as opposed to 70% on someone who is equivalent. Another Fist who has the Wisdom 12 there. Wisdom 12 there. I absolutely love Concussive Smash. I'm just going to say the ones at the top, the ones where I'm trying to think, ooh, where can I use this? I need to save my weapon action to use in a special situation where it's really needed. The further down we go, the more likely I'm going to use it, just in a case of like, oh, well, I guess it's better than nothing. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is that to use a weapon action, you do need to be proficient with the weapon. I take back what I just said about Concussive Smash, just went to test this again. And it actually did use her spell save DC, even though the tooltip said it would use the highest DC that she has. Which is a bit annoying about the tooltips sometimes, that they are wrong, especially linked to things like difficulty class. We really have to try and pay attention to the combat log down here. Next up is Disarming Strike, which is only available for tridents. So it does pretty much what it says on the tin. You can disarm the opponent. So the saving throw here is actually higher than you might expect. So Shadowheart has, well, we start with 8. Her proficiency is +4, so that gets up to 12. And then the highest out of strength and dexterity is dexterity. And we add 2, that is up to 14. And most weapons action DCs actually have a +2 added. I don't know the reason for that. It's kind of just the way it is. And anyway, now we can go and pick it up. You cannot use this against enemies that are not holding a weapon. So against lots of beasts, monsters, you can't even use this. So I'm going to leave this in B tier. If every enemy in the game held a weapon, I'd probably put it higher. But the other thing is that the damage done for Disarming Strike is actually only 1d4 plus your strength or dexterity modifier. Now, it's not that we're using these weapon abilities for their damage, but when it does lower damage than what you're already doing, that is a bit of a downside. I really do like disarming enemies because it really kind of takes them out of the combat half the time, unless they're spellcasters, of course. Okay, next up is Flourish. And while I was just preparing my weapons for this, something else I want to point out is if you are dual wielding, I've taken the dual wielder feat kind of just to show this off. If you are dual wielding, the weapon action you get is just the one in your main hand. So we can see here this weapon has Tenacity, Heartstopper, and Concussive Smash, and we've got Commander Strike up here. So we've got Heartstopper, Concussive Smash, and Tenacity is just an inbuilt one. If I swap these over, the weapon abilities swap over, but I do still keep the extra action coming from the offhand weapon. Anyway, Flourish. Flourish is the one we're looking at. This Flourish is available to scimitars, short swords, and rapiers, and interestingly, it does only use, it uses a bonus action. And it's a dexterity saving throw to save against. And as before, this is one of the weapon actions that adds +2 to your spell save DC. Unfortunately, yeah, Will's dexterity is quite low, so I don't know the chances that this will actually work. Well, that didn't work out so well, so... There we are, critical hit, lovely. Also a nice time to show that with critical hits, the damage does get rolled twice. And if you're half orc, you get the extra damage dice. And unfortunately for Flourish, the weapon damage is only 1d4. So what does Flourish do? Well, it has disadvantage on strength and dexterity checks. That's not the same as saving throws. So it doesn't help with, for example, I just tested this out just to be doubly sure. Gale cast Lightning Bolt. There was no disadvantage on that saving throw. It's only good for inflicting advantage for one attack, the next attack, or until they take damage. Although she took damage, she didn't lose off balance, so really it's not quite true, is it? Really, I think it's actually the next attack. So if Gale then tries to shoot, you can see off balance there. Let's just get out of the way there. There were 84% chance to hit. And then she would have, well, she lost it, I suppose, but she would have lost it off balance there. Struggling between B and C, I'm probably going to leave it at B. The things that saved it for me is the fact it's a bonus action. And it's one of the weapon action DCs, which is +2. Having advantage for one attack is nice, I suppose. Does a bit of damage. Sometimes I'll use it after using my actions and seeing, oh, the enemy has only got a few hit points left. And it does non-lethal damage, so it will knock enemies out, if that's something that's important to you. But definitely not any higher, because it doesn't affect saving throws, and the advantage is only for one attack, or until an attack hits, let's say, anyway. Next up is Hamstring Shot. This is for short bows and long bows, I suppose non-crossbows. So what does it do? Shoot an enemy in the thigh and possibly reduce their movement speed by 50%. So they have to pass a Constitution saving throw. The weapon action DC is +2. You can see here, movement speed reduced by 50%. Removed by healing. Enemies don't heal each other too much. So I've actually got to hit someone first. They've all got a relatively... Oh no, we're looking at Constitution here. I think all their Constitutions are pretty good. And they're proficient in these throws. Alright, gotta go for the one at the back. There we are. Hamstrung. Movement speed reduced by 50%. Kind of solid. It's pretty good. I would hope that when someone who's using a ranged weapon is actually using this, they're far enough away that it does make a difference. And this is really nice to link up with Ray of Frost, which also reduces movement speed by 10 feet, or maybe knocking them prone as well. Really, really slows them down a lot. Okay, next up is Heartstopper here. So it does 1d4 plus your strength or dexterity modifier worth of damage. This is only available to Morningstar, so really it'll be strength modifier unless there's some special Morningstar out there. If the enemy fails a Constitution saving throw, where the weapon action DC is also +2, then they will have chest trauma, which is amazing. Not only does it inflict disadvantage on Constitution saving throws, which helps with a variety of spells, and maybe weapon actions, the enemy has one fewer action, which means they're going to end up doing nothing. So here we are, Heartstopper. Chest trauma, cool little sound there. So the DC is 20, there we are. That's my weapon action DC +2. Do not trust the dialogue here. When you hover over Constitution saving throw, it says 14. This one here just hasn't added any of the strength. So on his next turn, he doesn't have command or anything, it's just chest trauma. he uses a bonus action and, well, that's it. Nice. Anyway, I love it. The main downside to this... Sorry, putting this up to here in S tier. The main downside to this is that it's only available to Morning Stars. I really wish it was more widely available, but if you can wield a Morning Star, this is such a strong ability. Okay, next up is Lacerate. This is quite widely available. Hand axes, sickles, scimitars, battle axes, longswords, glaives, great axes, great swords, and halberds. Yeah, quite a lot. So what does it do? Well, it hits the enemy for the normal weapon damage, and it makes it bleed. The enemy takes 2 slashing damage at the start of each turn. That's really not much. You're not inflicting bleeding for the damage. It's just 2 damage, maybe twice, like 4 damage in total. But the great thing is it has disadvantage on Constitution saving throws. The spell save DC, or spell save, the weapon action DC is equal to your weapon action DC plus 2. Now these guys have all got quite a decent Constitution, so I don't know how well this will work. Yeah, they saved against it. This is the sort of time where it would be nice if the enemy already had disadvantage on Constitution saving throws, but there we have it. I think it's a solid A. So the nice thing about Lacerate is that it has its normal weapon damage, so you're not giving up any damage to inflict bleeding, and bleeding is really good because it gives disadvantage on Constitution saving throws. So if Gale then wanted to go and use Shatter, it would, well, okay, they're not bleeding. I wonder, I'm going to throw a Spiked Bulb, which automatically inflicts bleeding. So before it was a 70% chance, now it's 91%. Lovely stuff. Anyway, yeah, solid A tier for me. Next up is Maiming Strike. This is available to war picks and battle axes. And I just want to point out some magic weapons, such as this spear here, even though it's not a war pick or battle axe, does have Maiming Strike. Anyway, so what does this do? It does 1d4 plus your strength or dexterity modifier of damage, possibly maims your target, which reduces the enemy's movement speed to 0 and disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. To resist it is a Constitution saving throw, so I'm not sure how well this will work again. These guys' Constitution is generally pretty high. The weapon save DC is also another one with a +2 added. Anyway, the maimed condition can be removed by healing. Again, enemies sometimes do heal each other. It's kind of hit and miss whether they do. Normally it's when they're on low hit points. Reducing an enemy's movement speed to 0 is really good because you could run away this turn, and after the next turn you could run away again if needed. And the disadvantage on dexterity saving throws is also really good because oh no, Celia didn't actually inflict the condition. Loads of spells have a dexterity saving throw to resist or have half damage or something. Wall of Ice, Chain Lightning, Glyph of Warding, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Blade Barrier for clerics. But yeah, having disadvantage on dexterity saving throws is good. And I mean, if I put Lacerate up in A tier, I think Maiming Strike needs to go up there as well. Disadvantage on common saving throws. Maiming Strike does a bit less damage, but it has the potential added benefit of decreasing movement speed to 0, which for some enemies really means they can't do very much on their turn, for those that are using melee attacks. Okay, next up is Mobile Shot. Now, I don't know what to say about this. This is absolutely shot itself. After using dash or disengage this turn, you can make a ranged attack as a bonus action. Kind of sounds cool, right? And this is only available to hand crossbows. I used my action before starting combat, so I don't have my action now. Let's just do this. So I could disengage. And then I get Mobile Shot. Cool, once per short rest. Now, the functioning people out there will realize we can dual wield hand crossbows, and I can constantly have an offhand ranged attack as a bonus action regardless of what I do with my action. Now, there is a slight use for this, perhaps, because this uses the hand crossbow that's in your main hands. This one uses your hand crossbow that's in your offhand. But if you're usually using your action for something else, you could swap these over anyway. The only time this comes in useful is if you are wielding just one hand crossbow. But why would you do that when you can wield 2 hand crossbows with no downside whatsoever? This is just the most useless weapon skill. If for some reason you want to play someone with 1 hand crossbow, this is for you. Maybe you've got some RP reason, you've got some character build in your heads. You want to create a character who has a hand crossbow in one hand and like a rapier in the other hand, some sort of pirate or something, and you love that aesthetic. Do you know what? All the more power to you. And then you get to use Mobile Shot. The other 99.87% of people out there, this is going to be not very useful because we can use an offhand weapon attack anyway for hand crossbow. Next up is Piercing Shot and Piercing Strike. They do the same thing, except one's ranged and one's melee. So if the enemy fails a Constitution saving throw, they will have a condition called Gaping Wounds. So it said saved, but then, well, it said failed and saved. I really don't know why there were two separate saving throws there. Anyway, the weapon save DC is the +2 version. Attacks against this creature deal an additional 2 piercing damage, removed by healing. So if Gale comes and does this, it did an extra 2 damage. For me, this is almost the same as Brace Range and Brace Melee. Perhaps you might get a bit more damage out of these two, because you're going to be potentially having more attacks hit an enemy than just having a single character here. Because if there was, again, a fighter with 12 attacks in Tactician or below, where you've got your normal action, action surge, haste, and the bloodlust elixir, you could have all use this on the first attack. The rest of the attacks have an extra 2 damage, and then you've got your allies dealing an additional 2 damage each time. But outside of kind of that fairly specific circumstance, it's just not adding that much damage. It's really, really not when you add it all together. At least with these, you're not giving up any movement speed, but I just don't think they're as good as the ones above, so I'm going to leave them at C tier. And then we have Pommel Strike. You can use this with longswords and greatswords. This is the second weapon action that uses a bonus action. I love it. And has the same effect as Concussive Smash. I really think the only difference between Concussive Smash and Pommel Strike, apart from the weapons they're available to, is Pommel Strike uses a bonus action, Concussive Smash uses a weapon attack. As before, it's a Constitution saving throw. If they fail, then they receive Dazed. And we already know how I feel about that. I feel like if I hit Gauntleted Winner, it might even... hopefully it doesn't kill her. Of course I had to miss. Now, Pommel Strike's weapon save DC is a +2 variant, a bit different to Concussive Smash in the sense that it doesn't use your spellcasting modifier. Alright, 65% chance. Come on, Jepson. Nice, Dazed. So just like before, disadvantaged on Wisdom saving throws, can't take reactions, and loses Dexterity bonus to their armor class. Again, here that doesn't really make a difference because they're wearing heavy armor. But another one at S tier. I mean, it's analogous to Concussive Smash, just a bonus action variant, that's all. Okay, next up is Prepare. This is available to great axes only. There might be some magic weapons with it out there. So sacrifice 20 feet of movement speed, a bit like the Brace, and deal an additional strength modifier damage with your melee weapon this turn. So let's use this. There we are, we saw the 6 come out there because we were prepared. Oof. And another 6 there. Fairly simple. I think this just scrapes up to B tier because at least the damage done is significantly more than the extra damage we get, potential extra damage we get from Brace. With each attack with the Brace weapons, it's an extra 1.65 damage on average, whereas this is an extra 5 or 6 per attack on average, which is probably enough just to bump it up to B, but I mean it's barely above C. I've only got a few weapon attacks left, but it's pretty much the ones that just deal additional damage are going at the bottom. What this almost really is showing is how good the conditions they inflict are. Anyway, we're moving on to Rush Attack. Rush Attack is available to longswords, spears, tridents, glaives, halberds, and pikes, so quite a lot. And it does quite a lot of things. Sadly, the weapon damage is just 1d4, not the normal weapon damage. So charge forward and attack the first enemy in your way, possibly pushing them off balance, so the enemy has to make a strength saving throw to resist this. And if they're off balance, we saw this earlier with Flourish, the next attack roll has advantage against it, and they got disadvantage on strength and dexterity checks. So the range is good, it's 30 feet, which is, well, without any bonuses, the same as your movement. So you can use this even just to position yourself. So it knocks her off balance, critical hit, lovely stuff. Now my next attack has advantage because she's off balance. But this is good, this is, you know, multi-purpose. There's a tiny bit of damage, not much, but again, we're not really here for the damage. Gets you extra movement and can knock an enemy off balance. And I would say because of the extra movement and the fact it uses just kind of one weapon attack, just the same damage as Flourish, I think it's worth being above Flourish. Alright, next up is Shield Bash. Now, shields aren't weapons, but I do not know when I would actually, what other video I'd put this in. So what does Shield Blow, sorry, I said Shield Bash, Shield Blow do? So when you're struck by a melee attack, the attacker must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall prone. This is really cool because it can really stop enemies in their tracks. When you or an enemy falls prone on your turn is over. Unless you have one of your other characters, if you're sharing a turn, use one of their actions to get you back up. Now this isn't available to just any old shield, it is generally magical shields, but I think there are enough of them that it's worth including here. Hopefully this doesn't kill everyone. Right, time to reload. So I'm hoping with only Will and Shadowheart in the middle here, we'll get to see Shield Blow. Not if I'm not prone, I won't. So here we are, Shield Blow, finally. Ah, they saved. I knocked them prone and you can see their turn ended immediately and they're prone for your next round. This worked when the game first released and then it stopped working for several patches and just came back again in patch 6. So I'm not sure whether it's actually a dexterity saving throw or a strength saving throw, because if I come to here, it says the attacker must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall prone. But the enemy actually rolled a strength or added strength to their saving throw, not dexterity. So maybe it's the highest of the two. Either way, it's a great weapon. Well, I guess shield skill to have. Okay, next is Tenacity, which comes with Morning Stars, Great Clubs, Mauls, and Flails. What does it do? Well, when you miss, I kind of want to miss now. I've already used my reaction, so it does require reaction. When I miss, I can use my reaction to deal an additional strength modifier of damage. Now, I wouldn't actually normally care about this on, let's say, Shadowheart here. Yeah, I did a whole 1 damage with my reaction. The thing is, I can use this again next turn. It's not like this is once per short rest. This is a bit different. You're never going to do that much damage with this. So maximum of 1 strength modifier per turn. And it uses your reaction. And as you can see, okay, I had a light cleric there. Perhaps on someone like a fighter who doesn't have riposte, perhaps you might get a tiny bit more use out of this. But it's not completely useless. It is pretty nice. I have had times on stream where people have like, use tenacity, especially on things like skeletons towards the beginning of the game where they are vulnerable to bludgeoning damage. And tenacity does only do bludgeoning damage. The main downside is that it uses a reaction, which in one sense is good because you can do damage when it's not your normal turn. But the damage it does do is relatively small. Okay, next up is Topple, which is only available to quarterstaves. So it does 1d4 damage, and the enemy has to make a dexterity saving throw. The weapon action DC is +2 once again, and knocks them prone. Edwina here might... Nah, she probably won't die. She'll die. Right. She failed a saving throw against Topple anyway. Critical hit is what really took her out there. Yeah, whoops. Anyway, we saw prone earlier. We saw it much earlier with Backbreaker. The prone here only lasts 1 turn. But essentially that is the same as Backbreaker. By itself, Topple is fine, it's good, because prone is a great condition to inflict. But you will find that it's only with quarterstaves, so it's unlikely you will actually use this very much. Because personally, I don't often have quarterstaves very often on my martial classes. Much more likely to have it on a caster. And lastly, we have Weakening Strike, which is available to rapiers, warpicks, warhammers, and flails. So the enemies need to make a strength saving throw. Now these enemies are very good at that, so I'd say this isn't very likely to work. It uses the weapon action DC +2. What does it do? Well, there's 1d4 plus your normal modifier of damage. This is non-lethal damage. Inflicts weak grip if they fail the strength saving throw, which gives them disadvantage on their attack rolls and saving throws. Aha, weak grip. Good stuff. So yeah, they rolled their strength saving throw. They rolled not very well. So on their turn, they should have disadvantage. And I'd say strength saving throws aren't overly common in things like spells and weapon abilities. So what we want here, yeah. You can just see there, disadvantage and disadvantage, which kind of seems cool. I guess it is. Where does this go? I think that's here. Giving the enemy disadvantage is good. Usually I prefer to make it easier for me to hit enemies and kill them rather than giving them a debuff for making them less likely to hit. But I mean, if Disarming Strike is here, then Weakening Strike can't really be any higher, because Disarming Strike takes away her weapons. But Weakening Strike should work against anybody. It doesn't have the limitation of just working with weapons. So there we have it. It's almost quite symmetrical in shape, actually, the tier list for me. This mobile shot, there's almost no point to it, right? Unless you've got a really special hand crossbow in your main hand, but I don't know how often that's going to happen. I really like these conditions at the top that inflict prone or dazed. They're like my top conditions to have. I also like the conditions that inflict disadvantage on saving throws for enemies, because then it makes not just spellcasters more likely to get their spells to work, but in fact other weapon attacks are more likely to work as well. I don't particularly give much value to these ones in like C tier or so, which give just a little bit of extra damage each attack. Like, will that extra 2 damage or 4 damage have made a difference in the end or not? Whereas maybe with Prepare, the extra 5 or 6 or for 2 attacks 10 or 12 damage probably will have made a difference. Anyway, like I said at the start, this is just my own casual opinion. You let me know what you think and tell me why you want to move any weapon actions up or down. And thank you very much for watching, and to the members of my channel, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.